Before my presentation, I would like to show a short clip of the film, which will be the subject of So, in this essayistic presentation, I would like to offer a possible reading of Steven Broomer's experimental feature film Tondal'S Vision and its connection to the history of avant-garde cinema, with a special focus on its relation to the Hungarian filmmaker and theorist Gábor Bódy's films and thoughts. I got to know Broomer'S films at a festival in Belgrade where our films were screened at the same program. His analog filmmaking process and poetic aesthetics are deeply rooted in the so-called lyrical tradition of North American avant-garde cinema, associated mainly with the names of Stan Brakhage and Bruce Bailey. This tradition is situated in the gray zone somewhere between the abstract film and the documentary. For example, within the same film, we can observe non-figurative forms and the documents of the world. As P. Adam Sidney writes in his seminar book, Visionary Film, that in the lyrical film postulates the filmmaker behind the camera as the first-person protagonist of the film. He points out that, quote, in the lyrical form, there is no longer a hero. Instead, the screen is filled with movement, and the movement, both of the camera and the editing, reverberates with the idea of a person looking. As viewers, we see the mediator's intense experience of seeing. In most of Broomer'S films, the artistic process of the filmmaker serves to turn the images into abstraction, filling the frame with ecstatic movement of formless colors. Steven Broomer'S primary material is the 60mm and 8mm celluloid film. His early short films usually include visual abstraction, which is created by mainly superimpositions. The best example of this kind of visuality are the short films Conservatory and Spirits in Seasons. If you are interested in the films, you can find them on Steven Broomer'S Vimeo page. However, these films are shot by Broomer. He created the abstract poetic images during the post-production process as material developing and the editing. These films show a close formal relationship with classical lyrical films, especially with Bailey's works such as Castro Street, where we can see the first-person poetic language of the camera movement and editing. Broomer'S later films step away from the lyrical documentary tradition and move towards another old experimental filmmaking practice, the found footage film. Found footage cinema is perhaps the widest and most popular experimental filmmaking practice today, which became current after the boom of YouTube and the extreme availability of moving images. Broomer's two long films, Potemkin and Tondal'S Vision, can be placed in this tradition, but they also the part of a very special subgenre of found footage cinema, which I call here abstract found footage cinema. They are much more poetic. The Broomer'S films are much more poetic and abstract. They are similar to visual music. These works tend to be hypnotic meditation on film history and visual memory. However, this kind of poetic film language is not entirely unique in the contemporary experimental cinema scene. The poetic or abstract found footage cinema uses mainly analog images, but in a very special way. The decay, the destruction, and deconstruction of the celluloid surface is a key element of this process. In this aesthetic tradition, the first pioneer was Len Lai, who scratched the film material in his legendary direct animation film, Free Radicals. But the real, complete deconstruction of the celluloid became an important aspect of this kind of found footage filmmaking only later. In the 80s, the German Jürgen Räble used chemical and biological decay in his artistic process, and a decade later, the American Phil Solomon and Bill Morrison became the most important figures of the abstract found footage form. The latter's film, Decasia, contains almost entirely destroyed footages. There is an important connection between Morrison's and Broomer's artistic process. The usage of 100-year-old celluloid strips draws the attention of the forgotten first decades of the film history. However, in Decasia, the film strips are destroyed by the time, not by the artist. Morrison reanimates the film's corpse, as Dr. Frankenstein reanimated the dead parts of the body. Maybe it is not a surprise that Bill Morrison made a feature-length found footage adaptation of Mary Shelley's Gothic horror. In Broomer's film, the abstraction is created by the celluloid's deconstruction, such as bleaching the material surface or creating cloud-like images during the developing process. Broomer described precisely the process in an interview. I quote, "I'm using a bleach solution called mordankage, and this is a combination of hydrogen peroxide, copper chloride, and glacial acetic acid. It's a real gross little soup. It looks like blue Kool-Aid, but don't drink it. It's very toxic, but this is the same material, so far as I know, that artists like Carl Brown and Phil Solomon have worked with, and so it's become wrapped up in the language of decay, which I don't really like." End of quote. Broomer says he doesn't like the word decay, maybe because his process is closer to painting, adding something to the image, not taking away. In the end, the image became a cloudy, foggy, colorful, dreamlike landscape, which has constantly moving surface, like if we would watch the original silent films through a red and yellow waterfall. In Tondal'S Vision, Broomer uses a more than 100-year-old film material, an Italian film adaptation of Dante's Inferno, directed by Giuseppe Di Liguro, Francesco Bertolini, and Adolfo Padovan. Broomer's film is also an adaptation, but an adaptation of a 12th century religious text, Visio Tunali, which reports the vision of Irish knight Tondal'S. Broomer's vision became Tondal'S inner vision. The lyrical film's first-person language transforms it into a third-person poetic. As in a dramatic monologue, the filmmaker or film poet uses a fictional person's voice like an actor playing a role. This concept makes these films is an archaeological or literary fantasy. Broomer is playing with the thoughts of creating a moving image 500 years before the first moving image. His film is fantastical invocation of pre-cinema. That makes Tondal'S Vision the closest relative of Gábor Bódy's American Torso, made in 1975. As Judith Pirner suggests in her essay, through the visual archaism and the deliberate act of creating the impression of fake found footage, In his first feature film, American Torso, Bode reveals his intention as an archaeologist of images, searching for the reality of the medium beyond the time frame of cinema history. Bode's artistic process has a close relation to Broomer'S. The Hungarian filmmaker destroyed the images, but he shot to create a fake found footage film. The main story of American Torso is set in the American Civil War. Sorry, I forget to. The main story of American Torso is set in the American Civil War. Bode, however, refused to make a classical narrative genre film or a historical drama. He made a denied adventure film instead. As Miklós Erdély, one of the most important avant-garde artists of post-war World War Hungarian art history, puts it. Pirner claimed that Bode's films is like an impossible documentary, playing the idea of found film material shot around 1865, 30 years before Edison and Lumiere brothers. Bode used the process of light cutting, which helped to create the impression of the decay or erosion of the film material. But at the same time, these pulsating, vibrating, and flickering images generate a kind of black and white abstraction of the surface of the image. Broomer'S process is very close to this, but if we use Bode's term, his light cutting is much more complex in the graphic and abstract level. Bode's images are more Puritan and minimalistic, Broomer'S are more Baroque. Unlike the other North American abstract filmmakers like Bill Morrison or Phil Solomon, Broomer does not use original film materials. He simply rephotographs the old movie's images on a digital screen with a 16mm camera, and then he uses the new own material. This appropriation is a crucial step in the artistic process. This process was called by Gábor Bode the cinema of the second gaze. But the second gaze is not only the rephotographing, much more the abstraction, which emphasizes the materiality of the film, or the skin of the film, as Laura Marx puts it. Pirner writes on Bode's films, quote, "The film rearranges the condition of spectatorial participation and identification by redirecting the gaze to the ruffled surface of the moving image, welcoming haptic visuality," end of quote. In Broomer'S film, the blue, red, and yellow clouds of the film surface has a hypnotic effect on the spectator, and this effect is amplified by the minimalistic music made by Stuart Broomer, Stephen Broomer's father. Despite the conceptual and technical connection between the two films, the haptic and sensual images have a more central role in Broomer's film. This leads us to Tom Gunning's well-known concept of cinema of attraction. In his famous essay, Gunning offers a new approach or concept to early film history, which simplistically says that the films made around 1900 were much more non-narrative and offered a direct visual attraction to the viewers. Gunning writes that rather than being an involvement with narrative action or emphasis with characters' psychology, the cinema of attraction solicits a highly conscious awareness of the film image, engaging the viewer's curiosity. Broomer's original source material, the Italian L'Inferno, can be positioned somewhere at the end of this area, labeled the cinema of attraction. But as Gunning writes, this attitude has never really ended, just dissolved in the spectacle logic of the Hollywood blockbuster movies and, of course, in experimental cinema. In the evolution of the cinema of attraction, the early Italian historical films, such as this film has a crucial role because they were the first model or example of the feature films. They opened the eyes of the American producers that the longer, more narrative and epical films has bigger potential in the movie business. If I want to simplify this process, the first historical costume films like L'Inferno were the first epical blockbusters of the film history. For example, they operate similar attraction logic as the 50s costume films or the present day's amusement park movies. This is the new critical term of Martin Scorsese, which labeled the current superhero genre and became a big debate on the websites. If I continue this chain of thoughts, I reach the point where it is possible to label Broomer'S Tondal vision as an expansion of the original film. Broomer'S film is basically followed the original steps of the old Italian film, as it offers a vision of hell, although in a much more haptic and attractive way than the original. Broomer'S gives us a new fantasy of hell without using CGI monsters or other contemporary moving image spectacle. He transforms the original film material beyond its own boundaries. Broomer'S second gaze converts the silent film into an expanded cinema, but of course in metaphorical way, not in the original sense of Gene Youngblood's term. In Tondal'S vision, a new colorful layer is superimposed on the original material. There is a very important tension between this layer and the source material. The silent film's images are highly static, wide images of landscapes recreated after Dante's poetic vision. Broomer'S new haptic layer, the layer of the second gaze, is a very fluid, constantly moving and colorful, a hypnotic surface on the old material. Maybe that is the archaic layer of the medieval text, the vision of hell written before Dante. Broomer'S second gaze is the before or before Dante, while Bodi's second gaze is before cinema. Broomer'S expand the boundaries or the frameworks of the film history. He shows us what it could have been, but it's not clear what this film historical fantasy would have been created in 1911 or maybe in the medieval age, when the literary material had been written. In this sense, Broomer'S fan footage film is much more mystical than Bodi's American Torso, but it is because Bodi was much more interested in language and meaning. In this sense, Bodi's film is closer to the structuralist trend of American experimental cinema, concretely Ken Jacobs, Tom Tom's The Piper's Son, or G.G. Murphy's Print Generation, both using the rephotographing or reprinting method. Broomer'S aesthetic expansion is much more closer to Péter Cherkassky's filmmaking attitude, where the celluloid reprinting or developing serves a very special attraction logic. Cherkassky's outer space is maybe the closest contemporary relative to Tondal'S vision. Here, a scene of a horror movie became much more shocking and sensual than the original, just because the formal processing of the materiality. Cherkassky's other film, Coming Attraction, also uses Tom Gunning concept, but of course much more directly and openly than Broomer. I forgot to show the last image. Thank you.